Hello and welcome to Global Insight, Arirang's flagship daily interview news show. I'm Oh Soo-young. For the next 15 minutes, we're going to spotlight a topic that's been making headlines here in South Korea and around the world. Now, multiple countries have reported increased drug abuse over the stretch of the COVID-19 pandemic, and well, South Korea's been no exception to this. In a report released by a ruling party lawmaker, Song Eon-seog, customs officers in South Korea confiscated over 1,200 kilograms of drugs in 2021. That's ninefold compared to 2020 and 18.4 times more than the reported 69 kilograms in 2017. Now, the number of drug offenders also mushroomed from 8,107 to 16,000 last year, with half of those people in their 20s and 30s. So how are authorities here fighting the war on drugs, and what should be done to treat addiction effectively? To discuss these issues, we have joining us today Cho Sung-nam, Director of the National Forensic Hospital under the Ministry of Justice here in South Korea, and Dr. Lucas Trautman, Medical Director at Oxford Treatment Centre. Thank you both of you so much for joining us this morning. And well, Director Cho, first of all, let's begin with the situation here in South Korea. Well, there's been a general sense that South Korea is a relatively drug-free country, and well, it doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Yeah, no, the Korea is not a drug-free country anymore, because in 1999, the number of drug offenders were over 10,000 and drug index was over 20. So Korea was not drug-free country from 1999. Recently, drug offenders were drastically increased. In 2020, the drug offenders were over 18,000 and 2021 over 16,000. So I think there would be over 1 million drug abusers in Korea. So Korea is a very dangerous country for expansion of drug abuse, I think.
Well, it's a trend that's been unfortunately taking place all around the world. And Dr. Trautman, now many have blamed the COVID-19 pandemic for, well, a lot of things, from job loss and depression to weight gain and baking excessive amounts of sourdough, so all sorts of things. But what's really concerning, though, is that there has been an uptick in substance abuse. So has there been this such upward trend in drug usage from your point of view?
Oh Soo-young, this is wonderful that you're highlighting this, because yes, in America, during the mitigation efforts of the virus in 2020 especially, we had loss of social connectivity, is what we say, where we had people at home without the accountability of their jobs, being in person every day. And, you know, there was a lot of depression and there was a lot of fear during that time. And we saw really great increase in alcoholism, in substance use disorders, like opioid use disorders. And unfortunately, we had a record number of deaths that year that we experienced here in America.
And Director Cho, well, here in South Korea, what has really proliferated the circulation of illegal drugs that we've seen recently? Has social media, for instance, played a role?
Yeah, of course. In the past, they could get illegal drugs only by meeting the drug traffickers. But now, they can get illegal drugs easily by internet and SNS, like dark web or Telegram. So they pay by virtual currency like Bitcoin. So they need not know the traffickers, and the danger of being arrested is reduced. So youngsters can abuse illegal drugs easily in Korea.
And Director Cho, another question. Which age group or demographics would you say are being the most affected by the spike in drug usage?
In 2017, main age group of drug offenders were 40s, but now main age group is 20s, especially teenager group is sharply increased over 45% than last year, because young people can use internet and SNS more easily. Main abused group is moved toward young age group in Korea.
And Dr. Trautman, well, there seems to have been a rise in the number of overdose cases, and those have largely been attributed to synthetic opioids. And well, why is this the case, and how can it be prevented?
Well, the director makes an excellent point. A lot of times online pharmacies are providing young people with Adderall or Xanax, completely non-opioid substance that the consumer is expecting to buy from these online pharmacies. These medications from the online pharmacies are now being tainted with fentanyl, with other synthetic opioids. One in the United States we're seeing emerging is called ISO. And so someone perhaps going to treat their anxiety with Xanax unexpectedly gets a lethal dose of a synthetic opioid. So the very important message for the people, your viewers, to hear is that they may inadvertently take a synthetic opioid when they think they're just treating their ADHD by buying a medication online that is from a fraudulent pharmacy.
And Dr. Trautman, well, to really understand addiction here, is drug addiction really chemical or psychological? I mean, how does it also end up impacting a person's life?
Oh Soo-young, that's a great question. So I would say it's both. We have, we ingest medications or alcohol or drugs that cause people to be physically dependent. They cause the brain to need those more. Structural changes, chemical changes happen in the brain that cause cravings. And then a psychological dependence takes place. So I would say it is both. And it's the cravings and it's the changes in the brain that make it very, very difficult for people to stop using on their own. The great news, though, is that there is treatment available and treatment works. And this is a very hopeful message. While families might have a son or a daughter or a spouse who can't stop drinking alcohol on their own or can't stop using drugs on their own, there are professionals and treatment centers and medications that can help them successfully stop using and live a happy life.
And Director Cho, well, there's also some concern over the effectiveness of preventing illegal drug sales under the current law here in South Korea, particularly as new drugs are becoming more and more abundant. What are the biggest challenges right now for authorities like yourself?
In Korea, main abused drug is illegal drug like methamphetamine and marijuana. But nowadays, prescription drug abuse is increasing. Many people, especially young people, abuse psychoactive drugs and sedative hypnotics, opioid analgesics like fentanyl. So we must pay attention to the prescription drug abuse, I think.
And well, Director Cho, what's being done by Korean authorities right now to fight drug distribution and addiction as well?
There are two policies about preventing the drug distribution and addiction. To control the supply, more strict punishment is needed for the drug traffickers. But to decrease the demand, treatment and rehabilitation are provided for the addicts. In Korea, government give more importance to punishment rather than the treatment for the drug abusers. Addiction is a disease, so punishment cannot solve the drug problem. So we must give the chance to have the treatment for the drug abusers rather than punishment, and must increase the budget for the treatment and rehabilitation.
And of course, such treatment and rehabilitation methods are so important. And while Dr. Trautman, I'm sure it's really difficult to generalize one particular, it's hard to really generalize addiction treatment for such diverse patients. But how should we then really understand addiction as the first step to treat it? I mean, do you have a personal approach to working out individual treatment plans?
Sure. Well, just yesterday, I was with a patient in the hospital, and they had a lot of really individual concerns about what coming to treatment would look like. So I always like to use the phrase, I meet the patient where they are, and I hear their concerns, I validate their concerns. And, we can individualize care by choosing the right treatment center. Our treatment center has horses that they ride and horses that they do therapy with. But when you get down to withdrawal management and getting someone away from alcohol or away from benzodiazepines, there are medical best practices which aren't really individualized because seizures can happen if we were to do it the wrong way as doctors. So while therapy and treatment environment can be individualized, the medications and the medical protocols to get someone away from a substance that they've been using for quite a while, those are pretty uniform based on current best practices.
And Dr. Trautman, just going to throw in another question here. I know you've been raising awareness of minorities, LGBTQ plus groups, and how they're particularly vulnerable to drug abuse. Could you please explain the situation for us, and also how we can really, how authorities can better respond to this?
Well, I can speak for in the United States that the LGBTQ community, by and large, is a community that's more at risk, where there might be more shame and fear of isolation and alienation if someone were to know, like their parents. And so we see more drug abuse within that community, and it comes from despair. So I've wanted to raise awareness because I'm passionate about helping vulnerable communities. And we do this by helping to reach out and let that community know that there are safe spaces, there are professional environments where they can come and get treatment and not worry about being shamed or harmed. And that's been very successful because everyone wants to heal and have hope. And so that message of hope and protection has been one that's, like you said, very important to me.
And Dr. Trautman, how can we really spot signs of drug addiction? And is there any immediate action that we can take upon seeing somebody overdose?
It's both really great questions. So the signs of addiction is if we have a behavior change in an adolescent, grades going down, sleeping all the time, not sleeping enough. Just the mother's intuition can often pick up adolescent change in behavior. And we want to get that recognized and treated as early as possible while no change has happened to the organs or the brain. We want to get that adolescent treated as soon as possible, early in the course of the illness. For adults, it's different. Maybe work performance slips, maybe the spouse knows something, noticing that alcohol is hidden around the house. Mostly it's an acute change, a sudden change in functioning that we pick up and recognize.
And also for our young viewers here, Dr. Trautman, it seems that in South Korea there's been a spike of people in their 20s and 30s who are abusing drugs. And well, unfortunately, it seems that the use of social media is only going to intensify and proliferate. So in terms of going forward, are there any kind of everyday tips that you could offer to our viewers in order to really have a kind of healthy balance of mind rather than turn to drug substance abuse in order to deal with stress and modern life, basically? Absolutely.
So the population you mentioned, these young adults, their brain, their frontal lobes that are their filter and control their impulses, it isn't all the way developed. So we see a lot of unhealthy risk-taking behavior like using drugs. Social connectivity, connection with the parents, connection with the grandparents in the extended family often can help be a guide that will help young people not make those dangerous decisions. And then where I come in, and you can see that I really love my patients and I love to meet them where they are, I'm also a truth teller. I'm honest with them. When I talk with young people, I let them know they could die. I let them know that Adderall and that Xanax that they buy online could have fentanyl in it. They could kill them. And we have really hard conversations about the dangers of using drugs. And that would be a message that I'd want to convey to parents and to young people through this broadcast is if you take a pill from an online pharmacy, it could have something in it that could kill you, even though you don't mean to be taking an opioid or fentanyl. And so letting them know the truth of that, I think, is very important as well.
Right, certainly such transparency is needed, and as you seem to be exemplifying through your practice, Dr. Trautman, compassion is also needed as well in treating these patients. And if you're in South Korea and you want to turn to help or get counselling, please dial 129 and 119 for emergencies. But we're going to have to wrap up the programme here due to time. But that was Director Cho Sung-nam, Director of the National Forensic Hospital under the Ministry of Justice in Korea, and Dr. Lucas Trautman, Medical Director at Oxford Treatment Centre. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's where we're going to wrap up the programme today. Global Insight is on air Monday through Friday, South Korea time, with in-depth analysis on what's making news around the world. Thank you for watching and have a good one.